Wow.
And we're live. I'm just going to go ahead and do my spiel since I'm the one in the top left. Hey, this is Kaiju Line Day 2, and we are about sort of like at the last quarter of the panels for the day. This is Kaiju Commentaries 101, and technically, I'm not running this panel. This is my buddy Steve Ryfle's panel this way. Sorry. And it's always difficult to get that right off the bat. Steve, I'm going to let you take the floor, though, man. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you, Kyle, for having us, and thank you for putting on this event over the weekend. It's, from what I can tell, it's been a smashing success, and thank you to everybody who has tuned into this panel. We thought it would be fun to talk about audio commentaries. I get a lot of emails and IMs about them over the years, and I guess it's been about 15 years almost since Ed and I, along with Keith Aiken, recorded our first audio commentary for the British Film Institute for the first Godzilla film. And Ed and I have had the privilege of working on about, I don't know, more than a dozen commentaries overall. So we wanted to share some of our insights and secrets, or whatever you want to call it, from our experiences, because we know that nowadays the landscape has changed with YouTube and social media driving so much of the fandom that, you know, commercial releases of Blu-rays and DVDs are only one part of it. There are people recording commentaries all over, you know, social media and podcasts and different formats. So, and we kind of see them as all part of the same, you know, field. So we wanted to talk about some of the things that we've done. Let's introduce everybody. I'm sorry, I'm kind of droning on here. Ed Godziszewski, my partner in crime for so many years now. Co-author, co-commentator, Richard Pusateri, who is a longtime writer in this genre. He, years ago, recorded the commentary for All Monsters Attack, and just most recently worked on the Gamera set, recording the commentary for Gamera Super Monster. Kyle Yount needs no introduction, but we will introduce him here as the the commentator-in-chief on the forthcoming release of Gamera 2, Advent of Legion. Ed and I recorded the commentary for Gamera 3, so everybody here has some involvement in that set, and that's kind of like the common theme. We're hoping that Patrick Galvan will join us. He's having some technical difficulties apparently, but he's kind of our critic and you know, journalist-in-chief on this panel. So we'll hope that he can join us in a few moments. I'm going to share my screen, Kyle, and get started with we have a little slideshow to kind of guide us along.
Sounds good.
Let me see what I can do here. Share screen. Share screen. All right. Is it working? Oh, I see. Okay, this is my keynote. And tell me if it is displaying properly.
It is.
Okay. So I wanted to just start by talking about the very first commentary that we know of, because this genre, giant monster genre, it has some synergy with the origins of audio commentary. In 1984, Criterion released King Kong on a Laserdisc, a really nice Laserdisc at the time. And Ronald Haver, a really significant film historian and preservationist, provided the commentary on that release. Ronald Haver was heavily involved in a lot of important projects over the years, including the restoration of the Judy Garland A Star is Born. He wrote books about Selznick and Gone with the Wind. And he introduces his commentary for King Kong by basically saying that this is something really unique. It was the first of its kind. It was made possible by the advent of alternate audio tracks that were afforded by the Laserdisc format. And he does it in the form of a lecture, and it's a really fascinating commentary. A lot of things have remained the same over these years. We're still kind of following the model that he set forth some, 30-some years ago. And if you haven't heard Ronald Haver's commentary, I assume it's available through the Criterion streaming service if you don't have the disc. And I know it is on YouTube without the actual movie video. Just a brief overview. There are a lot of different ways to skin a cat. There's different types of commentaries. Obviously, it started with a film historian because in a lot of cases when you're talking about older films, the filmmakers and people directly involved may no longer be with us, but there are many great filmmaker commentaries by people like Scorsese. The expert commentary done by an author, historian, or critic This is a picture of Tom Weaver, whose commentaries I really enjoy on the Universal pictures. There are moderator commentaries. There's a picture of me with the guy on the far left there in the pink shirt is Dirk Benedict from Battlestar Galactica and the A-Team, and the guy in the middle is Stig Bjorkman, a Swedish director, and I had the good fortune of moderating a commentary on a film called Georgia, Georgia that Stig directed and Dirk was in. It was his first film. And then there are the Kyle, you can comment on this. The fans drinking many beers commentaries. It's not making a joke out of it, but there are many kind of DIY commentaries that are out there and available through social media. And how many of these did you do through your podcast, Kyle?
I want to say we did 6 or 7 of them in total. And, it started out, I don't know if we're going to get into it later, but it started out really, really low key. I think the vibe I was originally going for was supposed to be, if you were coming over to watch one of these movies with me, this is how I would incessantly talk at you about this movie. And so I think for the first couple, I thought it was fine and good, but then the more people started actually listening to it, the more I was like, I need to pull back at the casual and add a little bit more detail into some of these, because I generally was doing commentaries for movies that didn't have commentaries already.
Right. And we'll talk a little bit about it. But one of that you're touching on something important there, which is that when you have the privilege of working on something like this, even if it's your own project, you do sort of recognize that you have a responsibility to take it seriously at a certain point, because you are basically an advocate for the movie. And this is a genre that for so many decades was not taken seriously and was not, given its critical due. So if you're deciding to do one of these things, whether it's a professional or commercial job, or it's something you're doing for social media or other purposes, what are you going to talk about for 2 hours? And a lot of these bullet points are things that come right out of Ronald Haver's King Kong commentary all those years ago, telling stories about the making of the film, telling stories or anecdotes about the personalities and performers involved, some technical details in our genre. And by the way, I should say that even though this panel is called Kaiju Commentary 101, this stuff mostly applies to any type of film. But in our case, we have a heavy emphasis on special effects, and that's what people really, it's a visual genre, so we were really heavily into that and breaking down the effects or talking about the people who made them, the production design, the music is so important. Financial details, the budget and how that impacted the production, historical context, that's really important with films like the original Godzilla. In fact, I think a big part of our first commentary was just telling the story of how the atomic testing program influenced the making of the film. Stories about the film's release, in this case, and it's a really interesting aspect of the Kaiju because these films, especially the older ones, underwent some transformations when they were released in the United States. And it's also interesting to talk about the critical reception and the legacy of the film, because in our case, again, these are films that were sort of given the short shrift for so many years. And part of having an audio commentary is, I think, sort of this latter-day recognition that these films are worth more attention and more serious attention. We're part of, I think, when we do these things, part of the ongoing reevaluation of these films. And you guys can chime in here at any time, but I wanted to just briefly kind of talk about do's and don'ts, because these are points of contention with some people. But I think when you do a commentary, you should try to tell a story, whether it's the story of the making of the film or the story of the theme of the film. And definitely show your passion. That's why you're here. Be enthusiastic. And share all the knowledge. As fans, you've spent all these years accumulating all this knowledge, reading, watching films 100 times. Let it all out and pay attention to what's happening on screen. That's kind of an optional one, but I think some people will, get so carried away and deep into what they're talking about that they lose sight of, the fact that there's a movie going on, and sometimes that can be bothersome to a viewer. I've had complaints about it, so just sharing.
You know,
oh, yep.
Your list of don'ts is a perfect encapsulation of my methods. So thank you on that.
Well, but Richard, you bring something to the table, which we'll talk about, which is your wit, and so sometimes when you do talk about something that is happening on screen, you do it in a way that I think is entertaining. So none of these are absolute. These are kind of like things that I think these are rules that are kind of accepted by people who do this kind of work, but I think rules are always, meant to be broken if you break them in the right way. Yeah, the last one though is a good example. I mean, I think there's so much more information out there now than there was 20 years ago. This genre has really exploded, especially now. There's so much content available through streaming and other avenues that, I mean, we're in a kind of a gold rush, for this genre. And, there was a time when it was really hard to find information, so you could be forgiven for going to IMDb and reciting an actor's list of credits. But really, that's not really telling a story. And I would, encourage you to dig a little deeper than these the easy sources like IMDb and Wikipedia. Any comments on this?
Yeah, well, I think one of the most important things you need to do if you're going to do a commentary is to be prepared.
Yep.
Don't go into it just thinking, oh, I'm going to wing it, and or in a lot of cases, I think the Toho commentaries on their discs are perfect examples of lack of preparation. They pretty much bring in somebody who's involved with the film, and they never ensure that the guys watch the film before they go ahead and do the commentary. Everything is kind of just off the cuff, and there's very little that winds up getting talked about that is really germane to the topic. You have a lot of digression and you just like time filling.
Yeah,
because nobody's prepared to actually talk about what the subject is. So if I would have number one rule, it's make sure that you're prepared to talk about whatever film it is that you're going to talk about.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a second a little deeper too. But you're talking about the Toho disc, right? With the Japanese guests, some of whom are deep involvement with the film, but they may not have watched it. An actor who's been in 200 films is going to be hard for him to remember, he or she to remember much about that production. And we were talking about moderating a commentary. That's, I think, if you are the moderator with a filmmaker or an actor, etc., that's your role, is to be the one who's prepared, because oftentimes that person doesn't have time to prepare, or that's not their job. It's your job to kind of lead the discussion and steer that person in the right direction. So a little bit about preparation and research. What are the challenges? What sort of challenges have you guys come up with, given that we're dealing with films that are in a foreign language, and that research materials are out there. There's more than ever before, but it's still difficult because of the language challenge.
The language challenge, and also the fact that not a single one of us were there making the film. Granted, a few of us have been on sets and stuff like that, these guys down here, but like that's like a day, which would provide a nice anecdote, but it doesn't give you an insight into the rest of the film. It's like all about that research, right?
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, Kyle, about the difference, because you've done both a commercial release, you've done, Gamera 2 most recently, and you've recorded podcast type commentaries, which are a different audience. So how did you differentiate in your preparation and your approach?
It was almost like a slow build. I sort of prepped a little bit for the first one, prepped more for the next one. The third one, because we did ones like GMK, which I just didn't do it justice, because that needs a dedicated, researched commentary, and I did not. I never point people to that. Actually, I'm like, don't listen to that. Don't listen to King Kong versus Godzilla. And it wasn't until our third one, which I think was Smog Monster or War of the Gargantuas, that I was like, oh, people are actually listening to this and they're trying to get good information. So I should really start doing some more research. And as I started doing the research specifically for the group chats, right? Because that's what we had. Because it was like me and two of my other co-hosts or something, right? So what we would end up doing is I would be sort of the information guy, and they would come in and provide other perspectives. But eventually we got to the point where we had to watch the movie together beforehand. Everybody had to make sort of their own notes on what they wanted to do, so that when we finished, it wasn't like you released all your information that you had about the movie in the first 30 to 40 minutes, and then you're sitting there going like, man, I really like this monster fight. It's really cool.
Yeah,
I've heard those.
Yeah, it's an easy trap to fall into. And as for the last point here about, whether you're going to do this with a script or an outline, or you're just going to wing it and improvise, just some history. Ed and I have always had a script, and that's because when we started with the BFI project in 2006, I think it was, we were required to, and most all Toho projects require a script to be available for review by Toho, and they're not interested in accuracy. You can, at least not in terms of anything regarding the making of the film, or probably even the plot. They tend to nitpick things like the way you spelled the monsters' names, which is really surprising. But we've been using scripts because two reasons. A, we're required to do it, but also we found that it really helps us stay focused on the scene and to move the commentary along and not drag on too long about a certain thing, because there's so much happening. When you have a script, what we do is I'm going to show you. This is the
we did get Patrick. Patrick is joining.
Oh, great.
I'm finally here, thank goodness.
Yes.
I have a couple of. Thank you.
I wanted to add about scripts.
Okay.
You have to have a script, because if you try to improvise, you're going to go off the rails and you're going to get completely out of sync with the film. So
right.
you've got to stay in sync with the action.
Well, but by the same token, I've seen plenty of commentaries where it was very clear that the people doing it had not scripted it, and yet it was awesome. And because their knowledge was so deep, and their ability, they were great speakers, great personalities, and they were just able to pull it off. But I'm not at that skill level either as a speaker or or any of it. But we wanted to just briefly show you what this is. These are some pages from the very first script we ever wrote, and this is an early draft. It doesn't even have the speakers' names on it, but you see we break it down into sequences. You can see we have a time code and a brief description of what's happening on screen, and then we just continue with that all through the film. Actually, what we do now is Ed actually takes the task usually of breaking down the film with an Excel spreadsheet, almost like scene or minute by minute, so that we can, when we insert our narration into the script, it's really specific as to when it occurs. And then you do like a test run, because you're going to go long. You're going to go long on much of it, and so you end up having to, edit things out. But frankly, the first draft is always too wordy anyway. What do you guys? What do you do, Kyle? Did you script it, or how did you do? What was your process?
My process for the group chats was never scripted. It was just an outline.
Of course. Yeah.
But as I was sort of alluding to, those outlines got way more specific. Now, for the Gamera 2 commentary, if you want to hear about that, I really, really wanted to, because this was my first pro commentary, I guess I would say, I really wanted to come across well, and really wanted to do as much research as I could. And as we were sort of saying before, without actually being there, I was gathering as much stuff as I could, and really only about 3 or 4 months overall. And so what I ended up doing is I wrote essays. I wrote essays on Shinji Higuchi, Shusuke Kaneko, Ko Otani, and Kazunori Ito. And so I wrote little essays on, some of them are longer. The Kaneko's his history needed expansion. So I wrote about each one of those, and I sort of figured out the best place inside of the commentary to put those. And then I had a whole bunch of other notes about a whole bunch of other things. And I said, well, I definitely need to put this about this actor here, and I put this about this actor here. And I sent you a picture. I don't know if you're going to show it later or what, but basically my end result was like a crazy audio file that
I
had
saw it,
layers,
yeah.
and it's because over the past 10 years I've just been editing audio every month for
Yeah.
hours and hours on end. So I was like, this is the easiest way to do it for me, is like to structure it.
Oh,
that
well,
way.
the digital editing makes things. I mean, I've had in the past, commentaries where there was a sentence or a paragraph that was just running too long and it was bleeding over into another scene that I didn't want it. You can splice words out if you have to, if you can make it work. But one question I had listening to you speak, we all worked on this Gamera set that's coming out from Arrow, and one thing that one disadvantage you might have, say we're all working on the Kaneko Gamera films, you don't know what the other commentators are going to say about Shinji Higuchi or Shusuke Kaneko or Ko Otani. You just don't know. And I assumed, especially because we're covering the third film in this trilogy, that Matt Frank and you were going to be speaking about Kaneko and all these personalities already. So we tried to keep our discussion of those individuals basically within the context of the film that we were commenting on. I didn't want to tell somebody's biography with the strong likelihood that it's already been told on another disc,
Right.
So and that's another difficult challenge that you have to face when you're doing something like this, because often you're working as part of a box set type project.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That was my challenge with Gamera Super Monster, was the fact that there's 8 or 9 movies covered in that movie, and each one of those movies was already had a commentary. So I was kind of concerned about if I was saying something really stupid and somebody had a better view of the movie on an earlier disc, they're stuck with me at the end. So
yeah, well, there's stuff with you right now on the screen. Richard, I'm not putting you on the spot, but there's been this long history with these movies to dismiss them, make fun of them, look at the cardboard buildings, all that sort of thing.
But that's me on the right.
Yeah, it is you on the right.
Oh,
yeah. Okay, just making sure. Yeah, no, and you talk about this in your Super Monster commentary, and now you've done 2 of these, and Ed and I will vouch for and advocate for Godzilla's Revenge any day, but there's a popular, opinion that it is a poor film. And so twice you've been given, quote unquote, the short end of the stick and had to do a feature length commentary on a film that a lot of people would just spend the whole time bashing. So with Gamera
Super Monster, I had to keep referring to All Monsters Attack, Godzilla's Revenge, because they're very similar, and one influenced the other, influencing the first one, because Godzilla's Revenge was a reaction to Gamera movies. So now here's a Gamera movie reacting to Godzilla's Revenge.
Mm-hmm.
But Godzilla's Revenge was a real movie,
right,
with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there were some really masterful cinematography effects that you could see where Mr. Honda was a colleague of Mr. Kurosawa, because there were some things going back to A Drunken Angel, this one little trick shot in Godzilla's Revenge immediately went right back to Drunk Angel, like a 40s Kurosawa movie. And with Gamera Super Monster, I didn't have that problem because that movie was really bad. I didn't have to worry about the filmmaking or anything. But you do want to avoid just ragging on a movie for 90 minutes, the MST3K trap.
Yeah, and I would say that, I've also had to resist that temptation or that reflex. Back early on, one of the earliest films I had the good fortune to work on was Gigantus, Godzilla Raids Again. However, when we were working on the Classic Media project, we wanted to record commentaries against the Japanese versions, but it wasn't, for reasons I never was privy to, that wasn't allowed. We were only, except for the first Godzilla film, all the other ones were recorded against the English dubs, which I don't get it. But nevertheless, Gigantus, so when I started, I scripted it and I started recording it, and the film's ridiculous in some ways. I mean, with all that stock footage and the re-editing and the narration, it played, to me, I felt like the narration that I was doing didn't work because the film.
It's like two movies spliced together.
Yeah,
the first half and the second half.
I regret it now, but I gave into this temptation to start making these sort of stupid jokes about some of the changes that were made to the film. And, you know, if I had to do it again, I would figure out a different way. But that was the one, I learned a lot from doing that. I mean, and I've gotten both, you know, emails from people saying that they really like that one, and other ones saying that, you know, it's terrible. So,
I mean,
you know,
dude, you guys took a movie that is definitely not as interesting as the commentary you created, and really, I mean, I really had zero interest in watching that movie because it's just so slow and such a terrible follow-up to the first film. But yeah,
Well,
hearing all the information was fantastic.
good. Well, I'm glad.
Ed had a commentary we didn't get to hear.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Don't spoil it, Richard.
Well,
What was I going to say here? Oh, so yeah, and the other thing about the Gigantus one that I liked from the beginning, one of the things that we've been able to do early on in this presentation, I had a slide up where we looked at a couple of different types of commentary. One that I didn't mention, there are other types than those, but one that we didn't mention is what you could call it like the archival commentary. There have been a few that I've heard over the years where maybe the participants in the production aren't available now, but there are archival, you know, interviews or audio of them, and maybe a moderator or host will sort of piece it together, maybe provide some, you know, connecting tissue, some connecting narration. Stuart Galbraith, our friend Stuart, actually did one like that for The Hustler, the Paul Newman movie, and with archival pieces, and there have been some other ones. And so we did that with the Godzilla King of the Monsters, has some audio from some, like Paul Schreibman, who was a producer on the film, and things like that. And I was able to, try to remember who was on, well, Gigantus, I had Stuart, you know. So you're bringing in like audio of other people and being creative in that way. So it doesn't rely on you to just simply talk for 2 hours.
Well, we had on Godzilla versus the Thing, we got the voice actor for the Peanuts.
The Peanuts, that's right. And then in Gigantus, here's what I was trying to remember. In Gigantus, some very nice fan loaned me audio from the radio spots from those films. He actually had the 45s, and he shared them with me. Nowadays you would just digitize them and email them to me, or FTP. But now, back then, he actually sent me his 45 discs in like FedEx or something like that, and he trusted me to use them and all that. Yeah, I
really love the Megalon commentary. How you guys had the Cinema Shares guy on, talking about that experience. That was amazing.
That was a good get, as they say. But I had to wrangle money out of the budget from what company was that? Media Blasters, to pay that guy Mel Marin. And first we had to locate him. He lived in Florida, and then I had now it'd be easier, but I think I went on Craigslist and found a cheap-ass recording studio in his neighborhood, like someone running it out of the garage. And I remember Mel Marin went to the address, and it wasn't a building. I think he was expecting like a professional recording studio, like A&M Records or Warner Brothers or something. And he walks up, and it was like some home in a neighborhood, and he called me from his cell phone. He says, "I think I got the wrong address." And I said, "No, man, I had to find somebody who would do this for like $25 an hour, because, you know, these things are there's no budget for things like that." Anyway, he went in the guy's garage and sat down, and we did it by, I think we did it over the phone or something, but it came out great. Yeah.
The Megalon commentary you and Stuart did is another example of how to do a commentary for a quote unquote bad film that is not in the MST3K riff on it there, because it was a commentary, you know, whether or not you enjoy Megalon or not, that commentary is very informative, because it really frames the film in a perspective where you can see, you know, what Toho was going through at the time, what Jun Fukuda had to work with at the time, and you kind of walk away with it with sort of like a new I guess a new level of respect for the filmmakers. You know, again, whether or not the film is your kind of thing, that's up to you. But you can at least appreciate, the context in which the film was made, and that's an example of how to do a commentary for a bad film without resorting to just cheap pot
Yeah.
shots at the filmmakers all the way through.
Yeah, I forgot about that one. But yeah, no, and the reason I had this panel today is just to fish for compliments. So thank you, Patrick. I appreciate it.
That's what I'm good for.
Yeah, I know. No, but no, you're right. I mean, I remember when I was offered the gig. Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember Media Blasters offered that film to me and to Ed, and I think Ed didn't want to do it or backed out somehow. Isn't that right?
I think at that time I had something else going on where I really only had time. Because they offered us both that one and Destroy All Monsters.
Right.
But Monsters, but I just didn't have any time to devote to that one.
Yeah, and I was kind of
honestly, I wasn't really all that crazy about doing what I'm moving on anyway.
But I was waffling on it too, and then I had a conversation with Stuart, and he said, "Well, what if we did it together? And what if we did it about this film's, place in Japanese movie history and the way the economy of Japan was, in disarray at the time?" And it became really interesting, and we had some conversations, and I thought it came out good. Thank you, Patrick, for bringing that up. But one of the things I get asked a lot is, "Hey, man, how do I get a job doing one of these things?" And the answer is, I don't really know exactly, but you don't do it, as I've seen some people do in the past, by posting something on Facebook or the Classic Horror Film Board or something like that in the past, where you say, "Hey, man, hey, Criterion, I'd really like to work for you on one of your Godzilla." You have to really, it's like applying for a job at, Home Depot or something. And I know this sounds stupid or cliche, but you really do have to do the homework to find out. This is the hard part, finding out when these projects are happening far enough in advance so that you can contact the company and put yourself out there, submit your credentials, and you have to find out who the producer of that project is. And it's probably easier now than it was some years ago, but usually by the time these things are announced and public knowledge is out there, they've already kind of figured out how they're going to do the extras and who's going to do them for them. So you really have to have like your nose to the grindstone or your ear to the ground or whatever, and contact the proper people in the organization, send them your credentials, and tell them you really make it clear that you really are enthusiastic about doing this and why you're the right person for the job. But we're fortunate. We've been we're old veterans of this game, and we sometimes we get solicited directly, so we don't really have to do that anymore. But I know that there's a whole lot of films that haven't been. We're going to talk about this in a minute. A lot of films that haven't had commentaries recorded yet, and there's going to be work to do in the future. And so there's opportunities out there for people who want to do this. This is just one. I'm going to make this brief. This is my mini rant. I've seen this happen more and more as time has, over the years, as streaming has become, has replaced, physical media, the budgets for extras have gone down. And when companies reach out to us, and that includes you too, everybody out there, when they reach out to you and make you an offer to work on a project, they often will ask you, I've seen this happen multiple times, they'll ask somebody to do this work for free. And I think it's wrong, because your work, your knowledge as a fan, you've been studying these films, watching them, learning about them for years, that has value. They wouldn't be asking you to work on their project if they didn't need you. And you have power to, to say no and to demand that you be compensated for your work. And the reason I, advocate for doing this is when you, and there's a big temptation when you're offered a job like this, you really want to do it, you want to say yes. And so it's tempting to just go ahead and agree to that. But when you do that, you're cheapening the value of all that work that you've done. And you are also setting a dangerous precedent for others that come after you. So think of what Harlan Ellison has said. There's actually his rant about pay the effing writer is on YouTube, I believe. That he's always advocated for this, and he made a big stink about it years ago when there was. I guess the producers of the extras for the Terminator tried to get him to do on-camera interviews and other things for little or no money, and he just put his foot down and said, "No freaking way." So just remember, that when they approach you to do something like this, they do it for a reason. It's because your knowledge and the time you spent, is really valuable to them. You're not just a fan. They often will treat people as just a fan, quote unquote, as if that's not, something to be, held in the same esteem as a writer or a critic or whatever. Forget it. You know a lot about this stuff, and you are in, the driver's seat, I think. And if it's a really low budget project, they can compensate you with, Blu-rays and DVDs and things like that, and that's okay. Okay, sorry. Soapbox off. All right, Ed. So one of the things that comes up a lot. By the way, Kyle, how are we doing on time? I can't see the time.
We're about a half an hour into this, so we're doing pretty good. Okay,
good. So one of the things that comes up often when you are working in a professional context are not only deadlines that you have to meet, and sometimes they're really tight. But there's a review process. We talked about the scripting and having to submit your script for review prior to recording. Sometimes they will strike things out of the script, or sometimes they will listen. There's a QC that goes on after you record, and sometimes they'll require you to delete things at that point. When we were working on the Columbia project, the Icons of Sci-Fi Toho collection, which included commentaries on Mothra and Battle in Outer Space. There was a reference to something related to the Three Stooges. I'm blanking out on it at the moment, but they made us strike it during the mixing session. Actually, there was a word that came down from Sony Legal because of a lawsuit involving some Three Stooges properties at the time, and they didn't want to reference anything like that on it. And it seemed really like random to me at the time, but we had to comply with it. So I think like a sentence was struck out of it at the last minute. I've had a non-kaiju project that I worked on a couple of years ago for a company called Xenon. It was a film called Penitentiary 2. A writer named David Walker, who I know Kyle is familiar with. He and I recorded a commentary, a really good commentary for this film by Jamal Fanaka, Penitentiary 2. I made an announcement on Facebook saying I'm really proud of this and I'm really looking forward to this coming out. But I acknowledged the fact in my Facebook post that the film isn't very good, because it's not. It's bizarre and weird and has all kinds of interesting aspects to it, but it's not one of this director's best films. And I don't think that's sacrilege to say, but I praised him and praised the series of films and talked about how we put this thing into context. But a family member of this director, who apparently had some sort of review powers over this entire project, which I was not aware of, saw my post and contacted Xenon and said, "Hey, what's this guy disrespecting Jamal Fanaka?" And the commentary was stricken from the disc. So there's all kinds of weird things that can happen, and you kind of have to be on your toes about this stuff. But what we really want to know is, where's that Biolante commentary, Ed?
Yeah, well, I would like to know where that disc is as well. I can't even remember now the name of the company that I did this for, but I remember when it came
Echo Bridge.
Echo Bridge. There you go. Yeah, they hired me to do commentary, and this was when I think Steve decided to back out on. But this was, certainly one that I really was enthusiastic about doing. I had done an issue of Japanese Giants on the film, and I had lots and lots of interesting inside information, original version scripts, and I was able to meet with Fuyuki Shinada, the suit maker who made Biolante, to get a bunch of personal stories from him. So I'd done a lot of research, and I put together I thought a pretty in-depth and informative commentary track on the film. The company paid me for it, but they had the commentary held up by Toho, because Toho was supposed to review and approve it before they could put it on the disc, and they were very slow in doing so. And in order for them to get the film out before, I think they had to have it in the shop to do the pressing by the end of October in order to get the disc out in stores in time for Christmas, which is what they wanted. It was like, I think it was like October 26th was the drop dead date. and Toho never, responded back to them with their okay or not. So they said reluctantly they were going to go ahead and press the disc without the commentary. So, unfortunately, that's what happened. They owned the commentary because they paid me for it. So as much as I would love to just like throw it out there and let everybody in the world download it and listen to it and play it along with the film.
Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, fact is, they paid me for it. I don't really believe that I have the right to do that.
Yeah, but other people have the inclination to do it, so maybe it'll happen. It's a really great commentary. I've heard it, and I know you've played it for other people, and everybody loves it. So, I mean, maybe someday that film will get another release. We can only hope. We're going to talk in a couple of minutes about future, let's see, uncharted waters, or films that haven't been given this treatment yet. I also bring up the Destroy All Monsters disc, which was kind of a snafu and a really unfortunate situation. There's all kinds of weird things that kind of happen. One of the things that I remember, two things about the Destroy All Monsters project that really irked me. The company that shall remain nameless in this part of the discussion, when we first were hired to do that work, we were asked, hey, when you worked with Classic Media, I probably shouldn't go into too deep details, but we were asked like what the procedure was for clearing all the extras and things like that. So my assumption was that we were sharing this knowledge because the same procedures were going to be followed. It was only at the very as the thing was going to press that I was aware that none of that had happened and that this was just going to be dropped on the market. And they were going to basically throw caution to the wind and hope
Toho won't notice.
Yeah, and I remember having a conversation with the person that I dealt with at this company, and I said, this is not going to go well, and they were confident that they could work something out, and I just, and I don't want the thing that was upsetting to us is that we don't want to be involved in things like that. We've always worked on projects that are above board, and we don't want to be associated with people that are basically trying to steal intellectual property. And so as it didn't go well, and the thing was pulled from the market, and etc. Everybody knows that. But the other thing around deadlines that I wanted to share was we had a certain deadline on that project, and I was informed a few days before the deadline. I received a call. It's been years, so I don't remember all the details, but it's something like, well, can you deliver this final mix tomorrow, or today or tomorrow, instead of 2 or 3 days from now? And because we have an offer to get this into Walmart or some other big chain by a certain date, and if we can do that, we can, I guess they can make a lot more money. But I work full time and do this kind of stuff, after hours and all that. So I ended up staying up for like 48 hours straight or something like that, because we hadn't finished the thing by then. And so we finished it and edited it and output it and all that stuff. So that, you do what you got to do, but that was unfortunate. Anyway, but the bigger story is weird stuff happens, and be prepared. So this is kind of a sample of, at least on the Toho side, there are other, studios that work in this genre of classic and more recent films that still haven't been given this treatment in the West, from an American or Western perspective. And there's still, I guess Godzilla 2000 is on here somewhere. And that one, Mike did a nice commentary on that because he was involved in the production of the American version. But correct me if I'm wrong, but none of these other ones have been touched by Western hands, Western voices.
There's a lot going on in Frankenstein Conquers the World.
Yes,
historically, socially, culturally, that could be described in English.
Yes,
that would be wonderful.
I mean, the entire aspect of the treatment of the atomic bomb victims is something that,
right, exactly.
An American scientist, over there, and that's true to life. That was something that had really gone on.
And there was a German submarine that was taking plutonium, I believe, or uranium, and jet engines to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And the theory was if the Japanese ever hooked up jet engines to some of their aircraft in production, the Second World War could have ended differently. But regardless,
I'd be interested to hear all of you talk about, if you had your druthers, like if you had your wish, fulfilled, which of these you'd like to work on. And for me, I mean, the two that jump out, I mean, there's Gargantuas and Frankenstein, but I would love to be able to work on King Kong versus Godzilla. I doubt that'll ever happen. Or, Hedorah. Those are two those films are just, there's so much.
I did those.
Interesting. Yeah, I know. Yeah. So let us talk about the ones that you would love to do if you had the chance.
Well, I'd certainly love to, get a chance to tackle Rodan.
Mm-hmm.
Not only, because it's such a wonderful film. I also had about hour and a half discussion with Yasuyuki Inoue back, when I had first met him, and we talked specifically about this film, and I got him on video telling anecdotes about Rodan.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I think that, that in particular would make a really nice extra feature that could add into a commentary on a film that's already very commentary worthy to begin with.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, how about you, Richard?
Like I mentioned, Frankenstein Conquers the World. First half addresses issues that are not in any other Japanese monster movie, specifically radiation victims and the orphans of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is going to be on television tonight. But anyway, those are historical events which are largely unknown to American or North American audiences. And also the movie shifts gears in the middle, where I think Mr. Tsuburaya took over and decided to make it a funny movie. And never mind the radiation poisoning and the orphans scrabbling for food. Here's a horse that's or a pig that won't fall in a trap. Anyway, it's a very interesting movie, and you can talk a lot about it.
Yeah, well, the script isn't the greatest, but it is. Yeah, it does have elements of a great film. I'm working on a book now that has to do with the political themes in a lot of these films. It's sort of a selective history of the Toho side of the genre, focusing mostly on Godzilla. And there's so many. I look at this kind of collage here. From Shin Godzilla all the way back to, Godzilla's King Ghidorah, GMK, Godzilla 84, King Kong versus Godzilla, of course, Frankenstein. There's so many films that have interesting, political themes and ideas going on, and I'll be writing about them a little bit, but it'd be fun to have a chance to talk about them someday. This conversation really isn't about technical aspects of it. There are a few things I just wanted to mention. There's so many free tutorials out there on YouTube and on the web about how to record podcasts, and podcast is not that much different than recording a commentary. And so many people already have technical know-how, but I just wanted to share that there's a lot of free tools out there, and one of the things that I've used many times, it's an app called the Levelator. It was developed for podcasts. It's been around for over 10 years, and I think it's invaluable. It's free. It's completely free. And what it's basically designed to do is it's not just normalization. It's it's an algorithm of normalization and compression and other things. And it's designed for podcasts where there are multiple speakers, but it even helps give you that sort of FM radio NPR effect, even if you're a single speaker. And if you're not,
I did not have that in Gamera Super Monster.
Yes, you did. I applied it to your track.
Oh,
yes.
Thank you. I meant thank you.
Of you,
What I meant.
Huh?
It's very
I meant to say
generous of
thank
you.
you. That's what I was trying to say.
Well, the bills, the invoice is in the mail. So.
Ah,
No.
I
Because of the COVID situation and the lockdown, and there were no recording studios available for Richard to do his, at least the one where they were going to do it at. It wasn't available. So we worked out an arrangement where he borrowed some equipment from me, and then I edited and engineered his track. And then there's a DAW, a digital audio program called Reaper. A lot of people use Pro Tools and Logic and things, which cost money. Reaper is not entirely free, but it has a free trial, which is basically open-ended. And I know I paid for it. It's not that much to actually buy the license, but you can actually use it forever without paying for it. And if you want to try it out, it's pretty wonderful. It's great for audio commentaries. It's super intuitive, easy to use. It's stable. It doesn't crash, and it works really good for narration purposes. So I just love it. I wanted to share some photos. This is from, what year was it? 2006, Ed? Did I get that right?
I think it's 2005.
All right, well, 5. This was
I remember that this was the same time the White Sox were in the World Series, and we were watching those games.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, so it's even longer ago than I remembered, but this is the first session that Ed and I worked on along with Keith Aiken, and this is just a few photos from the studio, and I share this partly to show you, like, over the years, as streaming and other things have taken precedent over physical media, I've just seen the budget for commentaries and other special features, especially on genre films, go down and down and down and down. The first project we worked on was probably the most elaborate in terms of the amenities. We worked in a really nice recording studio that's, where voiceover work is done and ADR work for Disney and other studios in Burbank near the Disney lot. We got 2 full days to record. The producer, Caroline, who's in the upper left there, she flew over from London, and that's her going over the script in the booth while we're in the booth and she's in the control room. We actually had an engineer sitting there. I don't remember his name, but he was really good. So we didn't have to do anything with with the technical side of it. We had comfy chairs to sit in. We had nice nice climate controlled room. We had water available to us. We had a bathroom, and you could take breaks. It was great. it was really the best possible situation. But classic media was kind of like a DIY thing. Basically everything we do now is DIY. I'll show you. This is us 15 years later recording the commentary for Gamera 3 with my equipment and our own computers in Ed's hotel room. So how far we've fallen. But that's just the nature of the business. I mean, that's the way it is now. And there's just not that's why I say all of this is valid, whether you're doing it for a commercial project or for a podcast or some other YouTube video, whatever it is. It's all part of the same thing, really. And so the lessons we've learned can apply to things that are being done for for other channels. And I think you'll just have to image me with my laptop in my lap and holding the microphone, recording the commentary. Oh, and I wanted to point out, I don't have a Godzilla item collection like you guys, but I have a Gigantor over here, and I have from the premiere of Godzilla Final Wars, I actually have a theater exclusive Godzilla standing on top of a world. So that's my background, Godzilla. Well, I wanted to, I'm going back one slide because I wanted to point out the difference in the amount and color of hair on our heads. And also, I think I pointed this out already, but you're using all your own equipment. So, it's whatever you got, you just use it. And a lot of us have this is my 2011 vintage MacBook Pro that I, recorded the whole thing on and edited. This is what I tend to do is record everything in Reaper, which is the free app I mentioned, or semi-free. And then I dump everything into a program called Cubase, which I mostly have used for music recording, but I like the editing tools in Cubase, but everybody has their own preference for audio software and whatnot.
Did you charge Arrow for that cup of coffee?
No comment. But this is Kyle's digital audio workstation setup. It looks really awesome. There's a lot of cuts there, Kyle.
Yeah, a lot of cuts, a lot of markers.
Yeah.
Those markers were basically, I had a cajillion notes that I was going off of from like multiple files of text. What I really wish that I had discovered before about 3/4 of the way through the project is that Adobe Audition has a video window, which you can see down at the lower left-hand side.
Oh dear, how did you do it without that? That's crazy.
I don't know, man. It was terrible. I was like making notes and recording stuff, and so once I figured that out, it was pretty much smooth sailing since then. And I mean that is that's one of the most complicated audio files I've ever built. I've never done a movie or anything like that, so that was pretty much. When I took a step back, I was like, I'm done. I looked at it. I was like, that needs to get shared. Somebody needs to see the insanity that I created here.
Yeah. And I'm sure when I don't know about you, you're probably more advanced at this sort of thing than I am. I have kind of improvised a lot of my own methods over the years. And one of the things that I do, you know, we talked offline about auto ducking, and we do have, there are plugins and ways you can do that with a compressor. I tend to, you know, auto ducking, for anyone who doesn't know what that is, most of you probably do, but that's the ducking down of the native audio, or in this case, like the movie audio, under the narration whenever a person speaks. And it's kind of the effect of a voiceover over on the radio when an announcer is maybe reading ad copy over a background music or something. But in the case of the movie, this is a really loud genre, the explosions and the buildings crashing and the monster roars. So sometimes when you do the auto ducking, it still isn't enough. So I tend to do it manually a lot of the time. And I always want to have, you know, audible film audio, you know, at the very baseline level. But if you're not careful, it can kind of overwhelm the speaker. So I pretty much do it manually by cutting. Did you do it in an automated way, or how did you do it?
I actually did not even include the audio from the movie when I sent it to them. I sent them the sort of just like the podcast version of me talking over it. I did want to point out real quick that the 3 color layers that you're seeing there, that's sort of like teal, purple, and yellow. If I recall correctly, the top one, the teal one, was like just regular comments about what was happening in the movie, and the next one down was the purple one was like specifically about actors in the movie. Like I had said, oh, this is so and so, and this is what they've done, and this is why you should know this and that, and yada yada. And then the third one, the one with the largest pieces, those are like the essays that I wrote. So some of them I had to split some of them up into multiple pieces. It was an interesting project, really, really, really difficult, but fun and rewarding in the long run.
Well, I mean, I think what you're saying in a nutshell is this is a lot of work.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to research, their, you know, narration, the recording, and then the post work that you have to do to clean it up to make, because, you know, I know there are some speakers that can go in and just nail it on the first take or whatever, but I'm not that way because I need notes and things like that. So, and I think a lot of people are in that same boat. By the way, not to get too audio nerdy on you, but on that purple line at the beginning, it looks like there's either two mono files stacked, or is that a stereo file and then the rest of it is mono?
Yeah, probably the rest of it's mono. It's just like I recorded a bunch of these in different sessions because I'm literally just right at the same desk all the time. I can leave my microphone where it is, and I'm pretty much going to have the same volume level. Plus, I also run crazy processes on stuff. So yeah, that's most likely that it's all outputted as probably mono in the long run.
And the middle part is the long one is the guitar solo?
Yeah, absolutely. That you guys know about my Gamma guitar solo, right? It's pretty rad.
So
I have to hop off for just a second, but I'm going to be right back. You guys keep going.
Okay, I'm actually not able to see my screen, so I'm not, other than the presentation, so I don't know if we're able to. Well, I'm going to stop sharing here because I figured
I was going to say, is there any more presentation? Because if there's not, you can just kill that.
Yeah, I'm trying to get out of it so I can stop sharing. And how much time have we got? So we've got it. Oh, geez.
We're almost over, but I just need to launch this other one, and you guys we can keep talking. We can take some questions.
Okay, that'd be great. Now here's the real question: can anyone see the live stream so that we can get the questions? That's what we needed Kyle here for. Is anyone here able to see the
live comments?
Yes, I don't have them on my screen.
Not in this screen.
Well, what have we not discussed that we should?
Did you guys mention I came in like 15 minutes late. Did you mention like the Toho commentaries on their disc and how incredibly mediocre they are?
I did mention a little bit about that, how they're basically all conducted in a very unprepared manner.
Mhm.
You know, these old actors, especially, you know, they'll come in and it's obvious they haven't watched a film in 20, 30 years.
Mhm.
And because they didn't prepare and the host didn't, you know, prep the guy on anything or show him anything in advance, they come off, you know, have
Mhm.
a lot of wasted space and very few nuggets in those commentaries.
I know a lot of people have learned the Japanese language and even read, and they're far more advanced than I could ever hope to be. But when you're researching this type of material, and whether your source is a commentary from a Japanese disc or a text, Japanese text, one of the challenges is that a lot of the material just isn't that useful. Whether it's an interview in a book or something, a lot of it might be really extraneous stuff, and you can run the risk of spending a lot of time and effort translating things that don't end up helping you very much. So of course I don't use machine translation for actual final translation, but I think it is useful for like scanning pages in a book just to see if there's anything that I want to dive deeper in there with a actual human translator.
I see questions now.
Oh, good.
Yeah, well, I mean,
one guy says that he loves the Toho commentaries, especially the one in Waran.
not one that I've listened to.
I'm back and I can moderate comments now.
Okay.
So, do either Ed or Steve have any interest in doing commentaries for the Daimajin films?
Sure.
Yeah, we'd love to do those. Boy, that would be a wonderful opportunity. I'm not aware though that and certainly no one's ever in the past reached out to us about those, and it's not something we've pursued either. So, but yes, the answer is yes.
I will say the G team wants to know what the worst commentary you guys have ever done is. I'm going to just say my commentary for GMK was just, it's abysmal in the long run because I love that movie so much I didn't do my favorite movie service.
Yeah. I think Ed may disagree. I think the one that I feel like we could have done better on, it's not that it's terrible or anything, but I really don't care for the one, and I blame myself for the Destroy All Monsters commentary. It's just, it doesn't really capture the theme of that movie as well as I think it should have, and that's what I going back to the idea of telling a story, not just reciting the story of the movie itself, but trying when you go into one of these projects, and you're preparing, trying to figure out what the theme of the film is, and that really, and I think we did that pretty well with Gamera 3, and the theme of that film is more obvious. It's the end of the world, basically, but finding a theme that carries your discussion from beginning to end, and you're not always talking about that, but it's kind of like the connecting idea, and it helps me structure the script and structure the discussion. So I wish I could have another chance to do that one. I think could do a slightly better job. There's one thing, maybe one of the things that bothers me about it is, one of the things I don't like in commentaries when people blurt out like random factoids about things that in the greater scheme of things don't matter that much. But it's like something appears on screen and they'll say they'll apropos of nothing, they'll tell you what type of a tank that is or something. And
but that's my specialty.
Yeah. Well, but yours, okay.
Where do you get a load of cameras?
But you are talking about. You weren't doing. I don't think that you blurted those things out apropos of nothing. That's not.
I was talking about product placement.
Yeah. No, you had a whole. You
sponsors.
You actually have a theme.
Brought to you by Abrams.
Yeah.
He talks about product placement in that film. It's really prevalent. It's actually blatant. But there's something I did, and I won't talk about it, but in Destroy All Monsters that just makes me cringe a little bit. But anyway, everybody, it's a learning process. You're always trying to get better. each one you do, you learn from the things that you might have done better, and you try to do the next one better. And hopefully, you mostly do a good job, and you're always trying to improve. This isn't that easy. I don't find it easy. I find it challenging, but fun and rewarding. And I also think it's a great privilege to be asked to do this kind of stuff.
So I got one final question that I think we should get to before we just call it a day. Maybe it'll be fun. Are there any films that tokusatsu films that you would flat out refuse to comment do the commentary on?
Gentlemen,
Final Wars, unless it's a drunken commentary, which we did for the 1998 film, which was a total blast.
Yeah,
I would have to agree with that one.
I was actually going to say the 98 film, but now that I think about it, I mean, to me, it's an endless debate, but I mean, to me, it's not really a Godzilla movie, quote unquote. I'm one of those, fuddy-duddies who thinks, basically Godzilla belongs in Japan, and it's really difficult. I don't think the metaphor really translates well to an American film. It's really a challenge. I mean, God bless, the legendary folks for trying, but I think it's really hard. But that film, on second thought, I think I would enjoy just eviscerating it, but at the same time, I do think it's actually coherent. And
Steve, you and I have a lot of fun stories you can talk.
Ed and I are in the movie. You can actually see Ed. But we spent two. He spent two. I spent one rain-soaked night on location shooting the stuff on at the end with the bridge and all that. They had those big rain soakers on us. It was horrible. Yeah. No, I don't know. I don't think there's anything I'd flat out refuse. I'd have to always think about it and wonder if you ask yourself if you're the best person to do it, and if not, you can move on.
If I did Gamera Super Monster, I guess I'll do anything. So.
Yeah.
You're a trooper, Richard.
Yeah. No. You have no standards, huh?
If it's a bad movie, I'll be there.
If the check cashes, he's there.
Yeah, I'm waiting.
Yeah, there you go. So are we at time?
We are totally. We're past time. I just want to make sure we got a couple of questions in from the audience. Thank you guys all for watching, and thank you guys all for being part of this. And,
thanks, Kyle. Yeah, we appreciate the opportunity. Great job. Great job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kyle.
I will end the broadcast now, and if you guys are still watching and you need to go check out another podcast or another panel, don't forget to check out the Monster Kid Radio panel happening right now on the same channel. I don't know how that works, but it's doing it.
Wow. Okay.
See you guys.
Later.
Bye-bye.